Hello, my name is Anders, and I was just talking to my team, trying to get them rallied. We're making maybe 100,000 a day in affiliate marketing, passive income, leveraged through AI and crypto, and you can too, if you just follow my advice. And the number one secret I was just telling everyone about here really is that I watch Thorin's YouTube channel. You should too.
Gamersubs doesn't have the power to lift curses from people, but it can give you a little energy boost, has a nice flavour. I think has a very sort of smooth plateau with a nice... I don't think it's a hard drop off. I think it kind of tapers off at the end and you just kind of realise, oh, I'm not caffeinated anymore. I tend to have one portion a day. If you want to have more, go ahead. If you want to have not too much caffeine, you can also get caffeine-free versions. This is Acid Rain. This is a Sour Peach Rings flavour. I also like Guacamole Game of Art 9000. It's strawberry and lime. Lemonade's a classic one. Dragon Fruit Punch. Again, look on the website. Get 10% off everything on their website with the code Thorin, Thorin. So Aleksib, in-game leader of NAVI, now in-game leader of 2024, major champion, obviously from PGL Copenhagen, now won a whole bunch of tier 1 trophies because NAVI was like the team of the year and had that run during the middle period where they made the 6 finals in a row, still didn't beat phases 7, but also had more than that in the year if you go back and you count obviously the other major and then the Blast final that they had in the first season. And when Aleksib was in this team and they lost, I think it was when they lost the Blast to Spirit, people were trying to say, like, oh, Aleksib's cursed in finals and best of fives, man. He hasn't won one in like 4 years. You just can't win him. Like, best of five just does him in. And at the time, I actually thought to myself, like, that's nonsense though, isn't it? Because if you go and look at most of his teams, it's the problem of Aleksib's whole career. These are all underpowered rosters. And when he goes to the BO5, he's pretty much always supposed to lose to the other team, or it's close and then they just win slightly by a little bit. It was never really like Aleksib was the problem. Actually, it was often his teams. But I've got to say, I actually do think there's something to this now. I will say, again, we'll look, and it's not like NAVI have the most overpowered team in the world, but obviously they were the number one team, and they were much worse in BO5 than they were in BO3s, and there are some very good reasons as to why, as we will get into. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually show you on HLTV the finals that he's been in at tier 1. They were just counting the last 4 years from OG onwards, so they were even doing some online finals into them. I'll do the online ones, but I'm also going to start actually when he was back in ENCE. So, back in ENCE, technically this would be the first tier 1. Like, he's actually had loads of LAN finals, but just in the, like, finish scene, for example, and against lesser squads you won't care about. And obviously at that point, it's not the same thing. No one really cares about that. This was a tier 1 LAN in a sense, which is you had Mouse Sports, which is still one of the top teams in the world. You had Big, who was a pretty solid team and had made the final of Cologne this year. Although I think they already kicked Smooya. You had, like, Optic with Snappy. You had maybe even like NRG or someone. You had a whole bunch of squads that were decent. Now, admittedly, when you start out on LAN, but you're playing Vega Squadron, yeah, you should win. But actually this, just like later in NAVI with Eternal Fire, does sort of show something happens in best of fives. I don't know why, because I always thought he was a mega IGL here. He was like a real prospect these years. I thought he was one of the best in the world from 2019 onwards for years. In OG, he was still pretty good. In NiP, he was all right. He had some off moments, but he had something going. He never had the right players there. And then I thought, obviously, in G2, they didn't give him enough time. He still had some results that were decent. And obviously, m0NESY hadn't developed, and he did not have JKS to frag out. And he didn't have a coach. He had Extaz, who left the team himself and had some issues. And then, obviously, now in NAVI, yeah, he has one of the best teams in the world, but in large part because of him, and then you'll see Map Veto becomes part of that. But let's get into it, because this already shows something going on here, because actually, at this time, ENCE themselves are up-and-comers. They haven't quite yet made it. They've shown something at that minor or whatever, against NIP, etc. But in this final, you are never supposed to have it this close against Vega Squadron. Yeah, Vega Squadron's on home soil, a bunch of Russians and Ukrainians, but... And this isn't even where Chopper's the IGL. I think this is where GR was the IGL, if I remember correctly. Is that right? I think it was GR. Chopper actually is the one who top frags for their team. Believe it or not, that's how long ago it was, because it was in 2018. This was the lineup that became the one that went to the Katowice final, the next major, but that was in like 3-4 months after this. And ENCE did win the tournament, but look at these fragging performances. But look at the fragging differential. But somehow it goes to 5 maps. So it starts with them losing train amazingly. After a 10-5 CT half. Next up, they win with a dominant 12 T rounds on Inferno. Just 2, they pull out a close game. Mirage, they get beaten. Classic map for Vegas Squadron, everyone knows, even though at this point in time, they actually don't have May. I think he got a Gambit or something at this point. And then in the Decider, this was a mega long game. It was hours long. I actually worked this event. They win fairly convincingly with 12 T rounds on Overpass. But obviously, we want you to be against like top teams. Against Vegas 1, you should win. So to even have that as a win, other people didn't count it. It should count. The problem is, you should probably have 3-0 to 3-1 this. So then we'll go to Ents. Ents, obviously, there wasn't a lot of BO5s back then. So you had to basically make the final of like Star Ladder or, at this point in time, like an ESL or an IM event. So at IM Chicago, when Ents was still a good team, yes, they had just had that last place at ESL Cologne, but that's because they got like upset in the upper bracket, and then the lower bracket, they played Vitality, who was like the second or third best team in the world, and just lost a close series there. Before that, they'd had the Katowice final, they'd had the win at Blast Madrid over Astralis to win the tournament, they'd had the top 4 at DreamHack Masters Dallas, I think, no, it was in the final at DreamHack Masters Dallas and almost won that event over Liquid. They had a semis at CS Summit. So this was one of the top teams in the world. The problem is, this is when apparently behind the scenes they started to have some of the issues internally. And even though they did well to make the final of this event, there were some very good teams here, like Vitality. Liquid, this is one of the hardest clappings I have ever seen in the final. Now, I will say, this Liquid is, I think, it's only really for me, PGL, Stockholm, NAVI might be more skill. And in fact, man for man, I think this is the most skilled lineup to ever play Counter-Strike. It is so, as in of teams that worked, not failed super teams. This Liquid team was swagging so hard, so hard. Look at this. Look at that. That's inhuman numbers. And by the way, look at the maps. Map 1, get the fuck out. 16-2. Map 2, 16-3. Map 3, close, still win. You get 3-0'd. Now look, Team Liquid is better than Ents. But you actually beat the same Team Liquid at Katowice further back in the year. You would also actually go further than Liquid at the next major. Oh, no, you wouldn't. You'd make the same difference. You'd both make round of 8. So, yeah, this was really embarrassing one. But also the firepower was bonkers on Liquid. And I always thought, actually, Ents was a slightly underpowered team. What you had is Sergey was like the star rifler and was good, but wasn't like Nico. And you had Alu, who was a good AWPer, but he wasn't Ziwu and Simple. Aleksib was an all right fragger himself, and he used to sort of play some spots. Ariel was kind of your like streaky entry guy, and X7's your like not the big fragger, but underrated like clutch guy who sort of wins with like nerves of steel, etc. So it was a good all-around well set up team, but it couldn't match this team when it was shooting on all cylinders. By the way, in this era, Liquid went something like 22 series in a row without a loss and won 1 loss, I think, out of like 35 series. So almost nobody could beat them, but you got mega clapped in this final. Then we go online and you've got OG. I've always said I think this OG lineup sucks. It's not bad if you just want to be top 10, but the idea to make a final is insane. Look, you have got Valde, who's a really good sort of anchor type player, but he's not like, he's a borderline. He'd maybe been like, what, 25th in the world if you did a HLT with top 20. He could frag it over his position. NBK is there to be sort of like a supportive element and work on CT side and make secondary and CT calls. He was all right at that, but he was a big fragger. Aleksib himself sometimes has to frag. Man 2's supposed to be your star AWPer, but he's still on the come up, and this is actually the year he has all wrist issues. Issa was supposed to be like a streaky, skilled, Eternal Fire type entry player, not from that team, from Hellraisers, but he was just an idiot, I can tell you right now, could not come. And there's so much inexperience in this team. There's a lot of experience here, but no superstars, just a very good anchor player. And then you've got like super inexperienced stars in your rifler and your AWPer. Now, at the same time, sure, this was somewhat scuffed phase. They had a lot of problems online. The famous used to lose to Big all the time. Brokey was still just getting into the game. You still did have Nico, though. Rain's certainly not bad. Cold Zera's starting to not be as good. But the idea you get 3-0 is embarrassing. I'll say that right now. Like, yes, this is a really close first game. This is a reasonable game from the first half. But to get 3-0, FaZe was sort of like, what, like a 5th or 6th team at this point in time? This was actually, which highest OG ever got to was 6th online. That's a little bit embarrassing. But as I've shown in past videos, I did that whole one actually defending Aleksib where I show like the rankings of where his team has. By the way, that's aged phenomenally. But hey, what do you know? I guess I'll just get it right about Aleksib and Simple and Nico and Device. And you guys just have at it. You just have at it with your players. You think of this shit. Like, you think that fucking, you know, Cage and B and fucking, who else am I going to pick? Like, who the fuck else did it? Snacks. You think these are the greatest players of all time. Go for it. You just go for it. So that was an embarrassing one. I actually thought you should have maybe done a bit better in that one, especially at least don't get 3-0'd. Then you played Gambit the next year. It is totally legit to get 3-0'd here. This is totally fine. This is when Gambit is the best team in the world. They're even beating NAVI and winning Katowice, bro. Online, they were demons. They had firepower, and there's only one close game here, although you had the first half here. And they also had that sick way thing where the coach could call as well, and they just looked like phenomenal on the map. They had the most insane rotations and reads you could imagine. And as a result, look, you have Hobbit, he's good, doing better than anyone on your team. And then look at Shiro and Axile. How are you supposed to win? How are you supposed to... By the way, this is also the different OG. This is when we got in Nico with the lowercase, the one who got potentially bullied by Hundin. And we got in Flames, but this is young Flames. And Flames plays like shit in this series. He barely outfrags Inters and dies way more. But you're all going to go, he had Flames and didn't even do anything with him. Flames was very streaky back then. I wonder how old Flames was, baby Flames back then. Like, he's 21 years old now. This is in 2021, so take 3 years off or so. Yeah, he was really young and inexperienced coming from Israel. Valde wasn't as good at that point in time. Manti was still good, but was never a super duper star. No, by the way, Aleksib had 0 hits on TV top 20 players in this time period from the previous year. So to even make the finals big time, and then to lose, I'm sorry, you should lose. Maybe this is a bit embarrassing, but that's also a fabulous map for Gambit. If you know, yeah, this one is also one I don't really blame him for. He's not supposed to win that one. Now, this is one that's a little bit more interesting, because on paper, you might not remember that this G2 was any good, but they were at their first one. When he joined G2, the first event was Katowice. The reason why this is embarrassing is because not only did he get 3-0, but by the way, one of the best 3-0s ever. This match, like that classic IM Sydney 2018, where FaZe had existed as a standard and went 3 maps, but super close with the all-time GOAT Astralis and beat them 3-0, is one of the best matches ever, one of the closest 3-0s ever. This is an insane one. I mean, G2 could win every single one of these maps. Like, they were in position to win this one against FaZe. The Mirage one is that epic one ESL even made a little movie out of. And then the Just 2's of 16-14. And this is the one where what embarrasses you is JKS is replacing Rain. Because remember, JKS replaced Rops in the group stage because he had Lecouf. And then Rain came down with it later, and JKS had to swap positions and come into this one and win some clutches. But the reason it's a problem for me is it is pretty close. The fact that they have the standing means Carrigan has sort of outcalled you, in my opinion. Had people like JKS played above the level you'd expect. Twist plays a great series, actually. But if Hunter plays like this, mate, surely I've got to get a win. I mean, admittedly, Nico went -11. I'll give you that one. Jax played like shit. He was not JKS. Aleksib himself fragged very poorly, so I have to blame some of the individual performances. And I do think on paper, you probably should have won this one. It was extremely close, to be fair. You could have won this one. But this makes it feel like you got a curse. In fact, you get 3-0 win it too many times. Another 3-0. So when we come to NAVI, this is when, at the end of CSGO, the last LAN happens. And you have the international lineup, which is, at the time, very scuffed, by the way. You got Simple, who, by the way, still isn't prime Simple from the year before, or when he was the player of the year, or 2021, or 2018. He's more like 85% of that Simple. By the way, even though he didn't even play in CS2 the last few months, he finished 7th that year. So Simple is still really good. By the way, he doesn't play great in this final, though. Gets out-fragged by loads of people on mouse. Ima, at the time, has had the Blast Paris run, but actually hasn't been impressive after that, and was having a real hard time integrating into this team. GL is nobody. He's just a guy from Apex who's just all right. Like, he's not doing any of the GL things at this point in time. And Bit, actually, believe it or not, for the first, 4 months of this team, Bit was not actually anywhere close to his old form. He'd fallen off from 2022 onwards, and he'd kind of become a shadow of himself. He'd lost his position in the game. He didn't obviously, he wasn't working with the same IGLs, etc. They're working with the international roster now. It's one of the early events. But you get to the final, that's pretty good. But to get 3-0'd like this, I mean, you could have won that one, admittedly, another Nightmare Mirage game. The problem is, we didn't know at the time how good Mouse was. This was when Mouse showed us they're just really good with this roster. Like, Torji has the game of his life. Yimfat was just a recent addition. It was mega in this final. Exertion, eye test-wise, always checked out. Frozen was always supposed to be their start. They are a better team. They're supposed to win this one, just maybe not 3-0, right? That's why it does feel like he's cursed. Then this one, Blast Spring, was once you've won the major. We're in CS2 now. Obviously, before that, you weren't in BO5 finals. There weren't many BO5 finals. Obviously, you didn't get a Katowice here. You play Spirit, who, by the way, you were one of the only teams that played Spirit vaguely close at Katowice because you won a map off them. That Anubis game where Wonderful had the 1v4. And in the final here, Spirits had the bounce back because people think after the major, oh, they got exposed. Oh, what's going on with that? And Pro League, oh, where were they? Oh, they didn't go to Pro League. That's right. By the way, I'll do a video about this one day. Please don't say that they skipped Pro League. Apparently they couldn't have gotten the visas. They were invited too late because Cloud9 like turned down right at the last minute. So they didn't actually skip it. Like I don't think they could have attended it actually. Even though that was a point people like Maui, they said on the show. To be fair, we didn't know all the details back then. There was a lot of moving parts. In this final here, look, I do think at the time, Zontix was actually a much better player in the first season. I do think actually that you should have been able to potentially make this a 5th map. Like if I go look at the map pool here, Ancient, you were still a bit ropey on. They smashed you on T-side there. They were pretty good on that map. Dust 2 is where you probably should have been able to get a win. Reasonably close. Mirage, you actually win one for once. Admittedly, your Mirage went on to be insane after the player break and you had that streak of 12-0. I think it's even one of them. And then on Nuke, that was the problem that was always a very weak map for Immer. And so you just get destroyed. And this is when Spirit was probably the best Nuke team in the world. So I still think you should have gotten one of these and got to 5 maps at least. But it's not as bad as when you got 3-0'd. And you are now in one of the better teams. Although at this point, you're not the number 1 team in the world because you blew it at the Pro League, right? So if you look here, Donk does have a very good final. Shiro doesn't go that crazy. Zontix plays well. Magix has a good final. The problem is JL does great. He's a great player in finals. Imma's just all right. Wonderful actually has a bit of a dodgy one. And Bit actually plays very poorly. This is 4 maps. And he doesn't even get 40 kills. This is why I've always said this season's Navi was a fluke that they won that major. I don't even think they could have beaten anyone except FaZe in the final. I think Spirit or Vitality would have dusted them. Then we go after the player break, the first best of 5 final. You've already won Esports World Cup at this point in time. In fact, I think you'd even won... Then you go to IM Cologne. Yeah, IM Cologne's after this. And I did personally think Vitality would win this final because I thought they have the map pool to match you. They have Ziwu, they have the skill, etc. In the final, most crucially... You're losing 4 maps, but obviously it could have been 5 because you have another epic Mirage. By the way, you lose a lot of epic Mirages no matter what if you're Aleksib, except that one against Spirit because that was always a semi-dodgy map for Spirit. This is the one where this game really did decide the final. First of all, you would have been on 5 maps. And then secondly, I think if you lost that, you might have even have broken them and you could even have won on Inferno. I think they wouldn't have run away with this half if you'd have broken that map there. This map might have been the map of the year. It was a fucking banger of a game. It even had people doing clutch plays for Navi like JL. And you even had Bit coming alive at the end of this. He was obviously a specialist on Inferno. On Talkeray's been mega there. Crucially, they got a very close win over you when Wonderful was playing well on Nuke. I think it was the map you played well on, where Apex fragged out. So this was a mega final. I did think Vitality was a very dangerous team. You could have won it if you were NAVI. In theory, you're supposed to be better. I just don't think head-to-head with you. And spoiler, Ziwu did do his shit. In the latter maps, he came alive. He has 100 kills in 4 maps, guys. Like, this is MR12. That is very impressive shit. Spinks was good. Flames was all right. Apex even frags out more than a bunch of the players on your team. Immer does well, but actually, it's GL that plays like shit. Your big impact player has played like shit. I think the curse maybe affects some of your players as well. It seems like you have one big player. It was Bit before, it's GL now. Sometimes your best player just doesn't play. I mean, GL's the guy who normally is winning your big series. But I don't blame you too much. I do think Vitality was better than you for that final. This is where it gets worrying. ESL Pro League, right? Eternal Fire had just done that win over Mouse at Bet Boom Dacha Belgrade 2, where they gone to the final, and then they did actually have that best of 5 against Spirit, but they lost to Spirit. This is where Eternal Fire lost, and even if you think I clown on Eternal Fire, I clown on Madja and Eternal Fire fans. This team at this point in this season got pretty good. And actually, in this final, I will say they outplayed Navi. Like, if you want to talk about deserve, whatever that means, they deserve to win this final, not Navi. So they win Nuke in the opener, great one. Crucially, they did... I think they changed their veto. I think maybe they didn't normally veto Mirage. They vetoed something else. I forget what it was. And did that instead. Navi wins Anubis close. But look how close it is. And actually, Eternal Fire got better and better on this map in the next month or so. Ancient, again, is insanely close. But by now, Navi is a very good Ancient team. But look how close. Inferno, Eternal Fire claps you. Because even though Bit fragged out still, to some degree, everyone else played like shit. And then on the decider, Dust 2, they were right in this game. This is when they had Calyx still, remember. So I actually thought Eternal Fire outplayed you in this final. Madja even called a good game. I got to give him credit. You go and you look, JL again struggled. I think he's had some issues in BO5s. Wonderful played great, which is why you never hear about it. Imma played well. Bit was good. Aleksib was kind of a bit shit. See, Bit did what he could on the last map. JL had one map that was good. Imma was really good on Anubis, which was key. On Nuke, Wonderful was good, but that's always been Imma's flawed map. So this already makes me think, there is something going on in these BO5 finals. I used to defend it before because those finals made sense. Then we got to another one. Does everyone remember the context of this one? NAVI, #1 team in the world, winning all the events except IM Cologne. This is where they make the final and they're playing G2. Now this is the G2 with Snacks, and this is going to be the first event they win. I still don't think Snacks called a great game. I think Nico and Modesty played awesome in the tournament. They played awesome in this final. Modesty was unplayable. JL actually had an alright final. By his standards, a good one in general. Imma struggled a bit. Bit not as good as you want. Wonderful, a bit shit in this one. They struggled in this one. And the reason why this is so embarrassing is, remember, hadn't they beaten them like 9 times in a row or something? Even when they were scuffed in the first season when they were against Huxley and like Modesty was the best player in the world, they still used to beat G2 in 3 maps every single time. Every time they played them, they used to always beat them. Beat them in the EWC final when they had Snacks and Malbs. So you go to this final here. That was a really close game between G2 and Vitality in the semis. If you're Navi, you're expecting to win this. But this is what, for me, shows you did have problems in finals. So first map's Ancient. That's actually supposed to be a great map for Navi. I think the calling's scuffed as fuck with that roster on G2, but they win it. Partly because of this. Similar fragging, except Bit plays like shit. He's my like world-class anchor. Along with Yumfight, he's like Anchor of the Year contender. He's an amazing player. But he plays like shit. Imma plays like shit. GL doesn't have a good game. So that puts us in the doghouse immediately. G2 then wins Dust 2, which was a strong map for Navi at the time. Nico and Modesty going crazy. Alright performance, I guess. Then you come to Mirage. The Mirage that used to be undefeated, but Navi cracked it. But Vitality cracked it. Actually, you win this. You do win this map. You do a massive CT comeback, but that's not like your T-side callings getting you there, by the way. And as you expect, him has a great game. GL has a good game. The problem is the Decider's Inferno, one of the maps that the whole time I've always thought you're a bit sus on, as well as Nuke. And what happens? Bit doesn't have his best game. Imma and Wonderful combined for 14 frags, whereas Malbs goes plus 11. Now look, true, Navi doesn't have a Monacy. They don't have a Donk. They don't have a Zewu. These are some of the people beating them in the Navi era in those big BO5 finals. And here's the problem. If you give a super elite all-time generational player like that a full BO5, they are going to wake up. They're not going to be bad for 5 maps in a row or 3 maps in a row. They're going to have one map eventually. It's going to come alive. They're going to get their spots. Game's going to go. They're going to get Smeekle kills. Going to get a round going. They're going to get a little streak going. You're going to have the time out between game 3 and game 4. We have the 20-minute break to have food. And you can discuss things and talk to the spot psychologists. So the problem I always thought for Navi was they were an amazingly suited team for BO3. If this was CSGO and it was only BO3s, they could have won all these matches. And they could have had like 6 or 7 tournaments in a row and been a really dominant team with an era. And it would have been so incredible for Blade and Aleksib. But the problem is, I always thought Navi was slightly underpowered. Remember, this was the era when they were all having crazy stats. But I always thought it never made sense individually. Like if you put Gel onto Mouse and you put Bit onto, I don't want to offend him by saying a Russian team, so we'll just say some other English language speaking team. Maybe you put Bit onto G2 and you put Imma onto Vitality. Would they be as good on those teams? I don't think they would. I think it's when they're on this team together that they do it. I think it's Bit in the Blade system with Aleksib. I also think Wonderful's very cleverly used in this team. So this was a sad one, but obviously people from G2 fragged out. Then we had the Mouse one at IEM Rio. Now, the problem here is, you are playing Mouse, who, because this isn't the end of CSGO when you had the simple lineup, they are at this point choke merchants, aren't they? We're in the fucking stadium in Rio. Like, we know these guys can't keep it together. Yeah, they beat Furia, but like big whoop. So, you win Inferno. Good performance from pretty much everyone there. Dust 2, you smashed them. That was huge because they should be competitive on that map. 10T rounds. Mirage, they actually were a team that almost beat you in that semi-final at Cologne. That was the one where they got to like 13-10 or 13-11 and you beat them. This time they smash you on that map. They are actually a good map. Team on Mirage, they were always comfortable there. And then you win Ancient, which is very close to CT affair on this one. The problem here is Exertion, in theory, I think is the best player on mouse, and he goes -16. In general, your players just play well. Everyone you want to frag, frags. So I also think this opponent's a much more beatable opponent. And then that's it. That's the Bo5. So I do think actually it's a mixture of, he doesn't always have super duper teams. He's never had like the insane teams, except funny enough that one with Simple. And that was at the end of Simple playing CSGO. And he'd only just integrated into that international lineup and stopped speaking Russian when he played. Obviously he spoke English when he played in Team Liquid like fucking 9 years earlier or something bonkers, didn't he? So I have always thought, 7 years earlier, I have always thought some of them he shouldn't have won, but it's the fact he got 3-0'd, and there does seem to be like, I don't know if it's the calling, but sometimes his stars go missing. The team seems to have a really hard time stringing together maps. They did win some, but those are probably over the people you should have beaten, like Mouse, like Eternal Fire. So I think he actually probably was cursed in best of fives. I'm actually very interested to see if this NAVI roster stays together a long time, what they'll do in future best of fives, especially because, yeah, the majors at best of five, but you still have those other bigs, and now Blasts are all best of five, right? So it's going to be interesting to see it. The ESLs and Blasts, you're probably not going to get away with it if you're in this kind of shape. You're going to have to figure it out. Oh, and by the way, before they played that Pro League final against Eternal Fire, I did point out on Twitter that he is all but assured to break the best of final curse in terms of he hadn't won one in 4 years and all the land, etc. And he did indeed win that, even if he did make a dog's dinner of it, even though all these morons say it's not going to happen, etc. They say no man is an island. We all need people who've got our back, and supporting me and the content on my channel are the following people: Matt Pugnatio Rajcula, The Concept, Animosity, Banediesel, Ben Glass, Jasun, Jensen Goh, Tosh, Torin, and you know it, always a special thanks goes up to my main man, Jerky's Minion. Do you want to ask a question for my video AMA? Do you want to take part in one of those lengthy discussions where I talk about whatever topics are on your mind? Do you want teasers, find out who the upcoming guests are, or maybe even to suggest a guest or a topic for my content? If any of those perks or others catch your fancy, well, put your money where your mouth is and join the Skrilluminati today, where? In the Patreon link in the description box below.